Welcome to Hoop City with Paul Sir on the deep dive, and I'd like to welcome back Ben Golliver. Ben, we got a lot to talk about today.
Sure do. Sure do. I mean, some crazy games last night. The Hawks got run off the court. The Celtics dropped one, but then probably the biggest of all, the Denver Nuggets, an NBA title contender. They go home in the first round. 6 games against a team in Minnesota that was half injured, right?
Literally half injured. It actually was a real wild and kind of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride yesterday, to use an old Disney ride, because it was all over the place. I was out running some errands, and I'll start with the Knicks and the Hawks. I was out running some errands, and I flipped on, I forget which satellite station was carrying it. It might have been ESPN. And I looked at the score, and I go, that can't be right. It was the halftime score. And I think the Hawks had 38 points.
Yeah.
And New York had 83. And it was, I thought, that's got to be something in the satellite link, but sure as shooting, it wasn't. I'm trying, when I came home, I flipped the TV on, and it looked like the Atlanta Hawks, but I was wondering which high school team they went out and put in their uniforms, because that did not look like an NBA team at all. They were not ready for the moment, were they?
Well, I'll tell you this. I was just grateful that they got it done early. If you're going to quit early so that I could switch the channel over and watch Caitlin Clark play in the preseason. Right before the Celtics game started, I was able to see a little bit of her action before she had the ankle injury, unfortunately. So, that game was really done. And I feel like that series actually ended in the previous game, because Jalen Brunson finally, it was a case where New York Stars hadn't fully played like stars to that point in the series, and they had dropped a couple of really close games that you would usually expect to win those games with a guy like Jalen Brunson in the late game situations. And it felt like game 5, he came out, had almost 40 points, and it was like, okay, order has been restored. The better team is in charge of this series. Yes. And then it seemed like maybe the Hawks players just started booking their tickets to Cancun. I don't know exactly what happened there in game 6, but it was one to forget. And it reminds me in chess, they have resignation, where, if you're going to lose, you can you just shake your opponent's hand and you can leave. And I felt like maybe Quinn Snyder, if, halfway through that third quarter, if that was an option in the NBA, maybe they could just have a little handshake, with Mike Brown at center court, and everybody could just disperse and go about their business, right?
It's just like in Major League Baseball. You don't have to throw the 4 pitches anymore for the intentional walk. You can just wave them down. Could have just have brought the youth teams on and have them play in the Hawks arena. That would have been good enough. But I shouldn't say that. A painful ending is kind of like, let's just put it to bed. Let's move on. Knicks showed resilience. That's good. That bodes well for their next round matchup. But along with OKC routing Phoenix, the Spurs running all over Portland, the rest of the series have a bit of a compelling storyline, and one that I would touch on are the Raptors and the Cavaliers. I was writing down like a category of what we expected, and maybe this is a bit of what we expected from the Cavs and the Raptors. We thought the Raptors could be competitive, with the series tilting in the Cavs' favor. But do you think the Raptors have enough to go tonight in Toronto in front of a very, very good crowd and be able to find a way to extend this to Game 7?
I think so. I've been really impressed by Darko's defensive adjustments, and then just their defensive success against Cleveland's guards. There's been a lot of fluctuations in terms of quality of performance from Cleveland's side, which should make you nervous if you're a Cavaliers fan. It should give you hope if you're a Toronto fan. Cleveland's the better team, the more experienced team. They should win this series. I think they'll probably get it done. I do think it'll probably take 7 games, though, just because of how well Toronto looked on their home court, and how their defense just really tightened up against Cleveland's offense in those games previously in Toronto. Cleveland, they almost choked it in Game 5. I mean, there was some moments where you kind of thought, wow, is Toronto going to come up and steal this thing and do it? I'm just not sure they're going to be in position to win this series if Brandon Ingram is playing like he is. I don't think you can have a player who's making that much money on your team be a complete dud and expect to get a series where it's so tightly contested, right? Your best players have to play well in the playoffs. They have to be the driving forces, and they've gotten great contributions. Scotty Barnes has been phenomenal. Murray Boyles has been one of the big revelations across the NBA, in terms of
Very
his
much so.
impact as a rookie. I see everybody saying if you did the redraft, he's top 5 right now, and people are getting pretty excited about that. And it's very well earned praise. But ultimately, you got a guy making $40-something million or whatever it is. He has to play like it. And Ingram has been arguably the biggest disappointment across the entire postseason. So maybe I've jinxed him into having a big night in Game 6. I don't know. But that's why I still favor Cleveland just because of how he's played in this series.
Well, as you keep waiting for, and you think that Brandon Ingram's going to figure it out eventually. Game 4, he finally got over the 20-point threshold, but I think he needed 23 shots to get 21 points. So even in that game, he was still throwing rocks. And like you said, maybe the biggest disappointment, certainly the highest paid disappointment in the playoffs so far, but to your point, Darko has done, I think, a great job. The Raptors have responded well. And tonight, their home crowd advantage is the real deal with the crowd that they have outside the arena. I mean, the feeling and the spirit in Toronto is pretty unique. It's pretty special. So from a Canadian's perspective, let's hope they take it to Game 7. Moving over to the unexpected series, though, I think we've got 3, and then we have the big matzo ball at the end when we talk about Denver and Minnesota. But let's start with Orlando and Detroit. I mean, Orlando has been surprisingly strong after a very mediocre and real flat season. Where do you see this series go? Does Detroit have enough to come back from the 3-1 deficit and force a Game 7?
Well, Orlando has been so good in this series because they have 5 good players, and they're for like the first time almost all year, all 5 of their good players were healthy to start the series. And so they took control of the series because of that. Unfortunately, they've now lost Franz Wagner. They don't have anyone who can really replace him, and they just don't play as well when they don't have that same 5 core starting lineup group together. And so you see they get 45 points from Paolo Banchero the other night, and they still lose, kind of going away to Detroit because they just can't fill the other minutes without Franz. And so that really has opened the door for Detroit. I'm still going to take Orlando because Detroit won Game 5 with Cade playing out of his mind, shooting the 3-pointer very well. They have just not been able to generate enough offense around Cade and enough 3-point offense. So I think Orlando will be able to win Game 6 and win it ugly. But I don't want to rule the Pistons out because the dynamic of this series has shifted with Franz Wagner injured. I also think that's an issue for Orlando if they do win this series going forward. I will be picking against them in the second round, especially if it's Cleveland that they wind up facing, because they don't have the margin for error to suffer injuries. That's why the record wasn't so good during the regular season. As soon as somebody would go out, well, it's panic time. Offense looks bad, and now they can't score enough, right? So, this has been a very interesting series, and I don't think Orlando is getting enough credit for being an 8 seed beating a 1 seed. I don't know if the NBA intelligentsia really is treating Detroit like your typical number 1 seed because they're the new kids on the block and because they have kind of a flawed roster and they have 1 star with Cade and really no other great secondary guys. But we've only seen it basically once or twice in the last 20 years where an 8 seed beats a 1 seed. If Orlando finishes it off, they deserve a parade, even if it's ugly.
Might be a small parade, but any kind of parade will do.
That's right.
Boston and the Sixers. This here's an observation I had when I was watching the game the other night. We did not think Boston was going to be this good this entire year, and they surprised all of us. But what is coming through to me is, well, first of all, let's look at Philadelphia. Embiid being back and playing within himself. That's been impressive. Paul George looks like Paul George. He looks like the Paul George we thought he was, or that he used to be 3, 4, 5 years ago when he was very, very good. He's playing really well. And the rest of the Sixers have rallied around that. I mean, Maxey and Edgecombe, they played great. So you have a revitalized, energized 76ers, again, healthy, as you indicated about Orlando for the first time in a long time, if not all season long. But I also think it shows some of the inherent weaknesses within Boston, who I think going into the playoffs, we thought might be the only legitimate Eastern Conference team that might be able to run with OKC. But right now, certainly the series isn't over. You can't pass judgment completely, Ben. But when I look at Boston, I go, man, there's some gaps there that I think are being revealed now in the way that Philadelphia is playing. And you're looking at Boston and go, well, maybe they're not quite as saucy as we thought they were.
They were a great regular season team, but they had some limitations, right? The front court depth was not great, and they're just kind of patching it together with the big guys. Of course, they had to wait for Tatum to come back, and so Tatum and Jaylen Brown didn't get a whole lot of time to spend together and play in big moments this season. And then, also with their depth, it's a lot of hustle players without proven track records. And so you wonder, are those guys going to turn into pumpkins in the playoffs? And, it hasn't been a disastrous series for Boston, but certainly people thought they were going to wrap this up more quickly. I see a couple of key things on Philly's side. First of all, your point on how they're using Embiid is dead on. The first game back, he just ruined everything. I mean, he wanted the ball. He wanted the stats. Edgecombe's not getting to touch it. He took almost as many shots as Maxey and Edgecombe together. And I'm thinking, why did they bring him back? This is crazy. But what they were able to do in the second game with him back, and then especially in game 6, the offensive balance between all their pieces was as good as I've ever seen it with Embiid and his teammates. It was not about stepping on toes. It was not my turn, your turn, who's going to dominate the ball. It was Embiid, it was Paul George, and it was especially Maxey providing all sorts of difficulties for Boston's defense. Boston cannot stay in front of Tyrese Maxey off the dribble. It's a huge issue. He's getting wherever he wants to go. You compare it to their championship season where Luka had to work hard for everything. It's just coming so much more easily for a guy like Maxey. Of course, Boston doesn't have Drew Holiday anymore. Derek White, I don't think, has had the best series. And their wing players like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are more equipped to guard a guy like Luka, who's bigger, stronger point forward, than they are a real quick little slithery guard like a Tyrese Maxey. And so Maxey is just winning his matchup. I won't be surprised at all if he wins this series for him. I can see Philly going into Boston game 7. They haven't beat the Celtics since 1982 in the playoffs. And I think they actually have a chance to do it this year. And if they do, the Sixers fans are going to, that's a generation of waiting, right? That's going to be a good celebration. And the Boston fans are going to look around and say, what the heck happened? We thought we were going to the finals. We thought we might win the championship, right?
The statue might be in Philadelphia next to Rocky, might be Tyrese Maxey if you accomplish that right now instead of
Rocky
Joel
and Maxey.
Embiid.
Sounds great.
It does. But yeah, Maxey's really fun to watch. Like he is, and Edgecombe's going to be a great NBA player. I'm happy for Paul George that he's able to regain some respect because people forget how good he was. All we think about with Paul George is how hurt he always is. And to see him being able to meaningfully contribute and to take Boston to, 2 game 7, pretty darn exciting stuff. Now let's jump over to Houston and LA. Now here's my opening statement. Houston has the chance to be the first team to come back from a 3-0 deficit and beat LA because LA is not, you had a great article the other day, like if LA loses, it's not LeBron's fault. And I totally agree with you. LeBron's played really well. They get Austin Reeves back. Luke Kennard does the cadaver thing and goes like for 1 point. My college coach used to always say, if you had like a real low scoring game, I can get that production out of a cadaver. If you can't get more than 1 point or 1 rebound, you're of no value to us at all. But Kennard was just awful. Absolutely awful. And he had some encouraging games early into the series. So Houston seems to have found comfort zone without Kevin Durant now. They're doing some really nice things, balanced scoring. That I think gives them a little bit of a weakness from the standpoint of who's going to be able to fill it up when they need it filled up, which KD did for them all year. That could be their downfall. And I don't wish this on LA because I thought it was really a neat story to have, if I can use that 1950s colloquial term, to have LA be able to go up 3-0 with LeBron and without Luka and Reeves. So what are your thoughts on where the Lakers stand right now in their series with Houston, Ben?
Well, it's been a crazy series. The reason why I wouldn't necessarily blame LeBron is not only because we never expected him to be the Lakers headliner because Luka hasn't been out there, right? And Reeves just barely played in game 5. It's also just because we're in a chaotic time in the NBA, right? Where, it used to seem like it would be impossible to lose a 3-0 lead and lose 4 straight to get eliminated. But You look at all the injury issues on both sides. That just it introduces a whole bunch of elements of chaos, right? You also look at the fact that home court advantage is not as strong as it used to be. It's dipped quite a bit since like the 90s or even the 2000s in terms of how often the home team wins. And why does that happen? Well, some people point to referees not being as influenced by home crowds as they used to be because of training methods and all that. But it's also the three-point shot. The three-point variance drives so much of this. I think the team that's shot better from three percentage-wise in this Rockets-Lakers series has won every single game, right? And so the Rockets came out and they couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, but they've come back to earth a little bit, and now, or they've come back to normal, I should say, better. They've improved, and now the Lakers are the ones who are having all these shooting struggles. LeBron couldn't hit a jumper in Game 5. It starts to feel like heavy legs and fatigue. So Houston definitely has a chance to make history here. And I know it's going to be one of those things that becomes a barbershop conversation, right? Where the barber's, he's giving you your haircut and he says, Michael Jordan won 6 championships. He never needed a Game 7 in the finals. And look at LeBron. He blew a 3-0 lead in the first round. Like, people are going to bring that up. And I would just say, hey, the guy's 41 years old. He wasn't supposed to be in this position. And he's playing in this era right now where crazy things happen, huge comebacks, tons of three-pointers, just all sorts of results. So even if the Lakers aren't the first team in NBA history to blow the 3-0 lead, I think somebody will in the near future. It's just a matter of time right now.
I think you're right. And you make a couple of great points. The chaotic play, and that really segues into what we're going to talk about next, which is the big story, I believe, is Minnesota and Denver. But the frantic nature of the way the games are played right now, like you talk about in any kind of coaching strategy, slow it down, get into your sets, move the ball side to side. Well, that sounds great until you're out there playing against ultra quick athletes that are just dogging you everywhere, forcing you to make fast decisions under tremendous pressure 45 feet away from the basket. Add in all of the soft tissue and worse injuries, and the soft tissue injuries are unbelievable. But the story of tanking and injuries this year, Ben, that's just the game is changing in ways before our eyes that I don't think anybody could really anticipate. Pace of play, overwhelming athleticism, going deep into the bench. Real quick story. Think about the series between the Bulls and the Phoenix Suns. Barkley with his back at, kind of at the, 2/3 of the way through his career, backing his man down, pace of play a lot slower, slow bigs, working around. And you have none of that today. You can't control the pace of play. Even when you have low scoring games, it's not because the teams aren't playing fast. It's because they're shooting horribly and they're having a hard time scoring. And a lot of that is the frantic pace of play.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really critical observation on if it's not the Laker-Rocket series, it's going to be another series because the games are just frantic.
Well, I mean, look no further than this series, though. In Game 3, how frantic was it? 6-point lead erased in the final 35 seconds by the Lakers. They almost win that game in regulation because Houston is having these crazy backcourt turnovers, looking like a high school team, like you were talking about earlier.
Absolutely.
With the Hawks. And then how frantic was it late in Game 5 when Reed Shepherd picks LeBron's pocket, just robs him blind at center court late in the clutch to go in for a breakaway dunk or layup? I mean, that's sign of guys who have been really pushed to the max from a physical standpoint. And it's one reason why people should consider picking Houston. They got the younger legs, and often the younger legs are the more important deal. But at the same time, they've had all sorts of misadventures this season. If Houston were to drop one here and the Lakers could kind of escape, by the skin of their teeth, it wouldn't surprise me. I don't have a great feel here, but I will tell you, coming out of the arena after Game 5, it was dead silent. I think everybody was kind of quietly pondering in their own mind, oh no, the Lakers are about to make history. I think that's what they were thinking.
I think you're right. And it has that feeling, but yet, like you just laid out, Houston's not a gimme. It's not like they're a well-oiled machine by any stretch of the imagination. They're just not as discombobulated as they were, and they're starting to hit some shots, like you said, 3-point percentage. I'm talking with Ben Golliver today here on the Deep Dive with Paul Sir on Hoop City. All right, let's go to Let's go to the Minnesota-Denver series.
I can't believe you made it this long without talking about them. I thought we would be doing the whole hour about this series.
Well, I wanted to give some credit to the rest of the NBA that they at least matter a little bit, but now they're out of the way. Let's get to the real stuff here. Minnesota, I'll start our conversation with this. I thought Barkley did a great job at halftime of identifying what a true effort looks like on the court, a true desperation effort backed with quality of play on the part of a team that could easily have done the Atlanta thing, although it's rare to see that kind of tank, but they easily could have thought, woe is us, we just really don't have a chance, or played with uncertainty. There was no uncertainty. Guys like Shannon, who hadn't played all year, played like a demon, a man possessed. But so did the Stars. I mean, this was a coming out for Jaden McDaniel. This whole series was a coming out for him, both in terms of what he said, but the way he played. But the effort, the supreme effort by the Timberwolves and to be able to string it together over two halves, very, very impressive when they were down so many key players.
It's one of the gutsiest wins I can remember seeing in the playoffs. Obviously, it's only a first-round series, so maybe you're not going to say it's one of the best wins, but if you're talking about heart and grit and gut and just digging it out without 4 injured guys, it was incredible. This was a case where the home crowd absolutely made a huge difference. Have you ever seen A-Rod look happier than he looked late in that game? I mean, did you ever see him look that happy with Derek Jeter? I didn't. I couldn't remember that. You know?
No, it kind of looked the opposite with Derek Jeter. But
that's what I mean, right? And so he's living his best life, and he wasn't alone. I've seen that Minnesota Timberwolves crowd have its heart broken so many times in the playoffs these last couple of years. I was up there when Luka hit the daggers, and they've had some other misadventures at home. It feels like they all put on the white T-shirts, and then it's like, oh God, horrible things happen. And for once, it was their night, and boy, that must have been just an awesome party for them to experience. Jaden McDaniels, trash talk like what he came out with earlier in this series will often bug me if it's not from a star player, because it's one of those kind of unwritten things in the NBA. Don't step out of line. But what Jaden McDaniels did was he understood there was some weakness and some softness to the Denver group. They were not nearly as hard playing. They were not nearly as locked in as Minnesota. And so his trash talk was very pointed. I think it was thoughtful. It was not spur of the moment. It was a direct challenge. And when he's talking about the defensive capabilities of everybody on Denver's roster, and I thought I had no problem with it, because it just set the terms out there like, hey, we're not afraid of you. We know you've got a 3-time MVP, but we're here. We're going right at your throat, try to stop us, basically. And when push came to shove, I can't remember a guy walking the walk after talking the talk as brilliantly as Jaden McDaniels, especially a role player, a guy who isn't really like the face of a team, right? And to do it without Anthony Edwards was incredible. But I think it was 32 points, 10 rebounds, a whole bunch of great defensive plays late to bring it home. Jaden McDaniels was the best guy on the court in the closeout game. I thought he outplayed Joker, as crazy as that sounds. He had a bigger impact. And in the winning moments, he came up time and time again. Big steal on Joker, big defensive pressure with Jamal Murray, hits a clutch mid-range pull-up shot to kind of help ice the victory. I mean, he was just everywhere. And I think, in Minnesota, the fans, they love to get, like Naz Reid tattoos. I'm sure you've heard about that. All these thousands of fans who have tattooed Naz Reid. Well, it's a good thing you got 2 arms, right? So you got Naz Reid on one arm, and then you just put Jaden McDaniels right on the other arm to match, right?
Well, and Minnesota gravitates towards the lesser of the stars. They're not That's real true. Marquee people. They're much more of a grounded group, and they'll have McDaniel's tattoos probably before they have Ant's tattoos on them, because they like the underdog. They really do. I think you make some phenomenal points there, and I guess the series, to me, it was literally like a switch was flipped midway through game 2 when it was pointed out by the announcers. They were observing, when are the Timberwolves going to start attacking the Nuggets defense as opposed to settling for soft jump shots on the perimeter? And when they did that, they stole that game where they were down 19, and they came back and won it. The series really flipped in that moment. This is what I thought was interesting. I have never seen a team focus as intently on the other team's weakness and relentlessly punish that team, continually going at that weakness the way the Wolves did at the defined, McDaniels identified Denver's softness on defense, and they relentlessly, for the rest of the series, went at that and forced Denver to stop them, and Denver never could.
They couldn't. And not only that, they stopped Denver's offense. I mean, Denver under 100 multiple times in the series, closeout win. They can't even get 100 points with the whole season on the line. I mean, it's incredible. So a lot of credit goes to both McDaniels and Rudy Gobert in particular on the defensive end for having so much success against Joker. I think when we step back, though, people in Minnesota are going to remember McDaniels forever, and he probably will be a cult hero for his performance. I think the historical weight of this series, though, is what it really means with Joker and his career. And I was so disoriented watching the end of that game. It's like you never see all-time greats go out in the first round like that. Like, especially if the other team is half injured, it just doesn't happen. When they're in their primes and they're healthy, the best players rise up. That's the history of basketball, right? The superstars always get it done. And so I went back and I looked at every MVP who's still active. So I'm talking about LeBron, Steph Curry, Joel Embiid, Shea, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Kevin Durant. And I went through all their careers year by year to see, did any of them have a loss like this loss for Joker? And, the ones that I came up with was actually Giannis last year with the Milwaukee Bucks. They lost in the first round to the Pacers. I came up with Kevin Durant with the Brooklyn Nets, where they got swept by the Boston Celtics in the first round in 2022. And then I also had Embiid getting swept by the Celtics in the bubble, as being like maybe the most comparable situations where like an MVP caliber player was healthy, had a good team, and they just absolutely laid down in the first round and got knocked out. But even in those situations, there was always extenuating circumstances. Like Philly didn't have Ben Simmons, right? The Nets had just traded James Harden. You look at Giannis, Damian Lillard had torn his Achilles. Like, there's never been a situation where the situation was so favorable for the star in terms of being the higher seed, having more regular season wins, being healthy, being in his prime, being an MVP level player, being a champion, going against a half injured team. Like, this cocktail has just really never been seen before. And so that's why I really think this loss is going to stick to Joker from a legacy standpoint. Guys like LeBron and Steph Curry, who get viewed as top 10 all-time players, which is sort of what Joker's aiming for, don't have blemishes like this on their resume. There's nothing that we could point to. We can say LeBron struggled in the finals against the Mavericks. Well, that's the finals against Hall of Famers. It's not Terrence Shannon Jr. just run the ball down your throat for 48 minutes, right? And so I think that, Joker is an incredible player. I think he deserves all the MVPs. This was not his best season, and this was one of, I think, his worst series since he's really become a great player that I can remember. He just did not have the command and the orchestration that we're used to. And the reason why I bring up those examples with Giannis and Embiid and Kevin Durant, think about all the fallout that happened after those series, right? Damian Lillard got waived. Doc Rivers just left as coach. Milwaukee is now considering trading Giannis. You go back to Embiid with the Sixers. They fired Brett Brown right after that series. They traded Ben Simmons not too long after that. And with the Nets, it was a complete implosion. They ended up firing Steve Nash, their coach. They traded Kyrie. They traded Kevin Durant. And so what I'm saying right now after this loss for Denver, everybody's seat is scorching hot. I mean, scorching hot. David Adelman, coach, you got a lot to explain to ownership. Jamal Murray, that was a terrible game 7. Trade block, that stuff could pop up as a conversation. And I also think with Joker and his future, it's now a question. We always just assume, he's going to stay in Denver forever. These kinds of losses tend to shape players' careers, and so it's either everything is going to change around Joker and he's going to get a better opportunity with like Nuggets 2.0, or he's going to look for greener pastures and something else is going to have to give. So I expect big changes in Denver as we go forward.
Love that summary. A couple of thoughts that I have. First of all, just a real quick touch on Murray. He was horrible last night.
Yeah,
It wasn't just horrible in terms of going 4 for 16. It was horrible in terms of effort. His body language. Now, was there something wrong? Maybe, but I didn't think so. I thought Jaden McDaniels' defense wore him down. The fact that McDaniels can stay in front of him at 6'8", 6'9", with those long arms and make your life a living hell to get over half court. And then when you're over half court, to be under such intense pressure, it just looked like it wore Jamal down. But he had no spark, no lift, nothing in the fourth quarter when typically he's been quite heroic. So, and I give all the credit to the Minnesota defense on that. I think you just have to, watching the result and the outcome. But I also think that impacted Joker a lot too. For the first time, Joker looked rattled, flustered, and unsure of himself offensively. And that, of course, you have to give credit to Rudy Gobert. But I'll go one step further. Number two, I thought that the two wings, Johnson and Jones, I thought they performed admirably.
Yeah,
I really did. I thought they were fine. Christian Braun was god awful. Yeah. Like, you could not throw him the ball and expect anything good to happen pretty much throughout the series, with a few exceptional plays here and there. So I thought Joker had limited options of who to pass to, and he still had a lot of assists. But his uncertainty with the ball one-on-one offensively, the help side defense from the Timberwolves, that frantic pace that we were talking about before, that looked like for the first time it overwhelmed Joker. It looked like he was massively uncomfortable out there with all that was going on around him. I hadn't seen that before. Plus, I hadn't seen a player who he had, and what's interesting, Rudy Gobert found something new in him at his mid-30s age, and it was exemplified not just in how he bothered Joker, Ben, but those two assists that he had on kickouts to the corner, the penetrate and kick to his left, and then a left-handed scoop pass under Joker to the other side of the court for the open three.
Yeah.
Where in the heck have you ever seen Rudy Gobert make one pass like that, much less two within the same half?
No, and this is a guy who's kind of notorious for having bad hands, and he has like this beautiful flick of the wrist with his off hand to the corner for a three. It was like maybe he got some of Joker's powers by osmosis. I don't know exactly how that works, you know. I thought what we said about Joker was really smart. I mean, he got sped up and he got frantic in a way that he rarely does. Typically, what we see with Joker is his incredible basketball brain will calculate, I want to be a passer first. But if my guys are not hitting their shots, or somebody like Christian Braun is fading from the series, I am now going to recalculate, and I'm going to do enough scoring of my own to make up for it. And so in this particular series, given kind of some of the hit or miss contributions from his co-stars, you would typically expect Joker to go for 40, right? And it's just like, hey, that's what the team needs. So he defaults to that like kind of backup plan where he becomes the scorer. He couldn't score 40 against Rudy Gobert. That was the problem. Rudy Gobert was challenging him so well, making his shots difficult. And unfortunately, Joker just had a bad shooting season from outside this year. That's the big thing that opens up everything, that turns him into the unfair player, is when he's hitting the three-point shot. And boy, do the Lakers fans know that, because it felt like he hit every big three against them in the playoffs multiple times, right?
Yes.
But he couldn't hit his threes this year. And it was really a problem for a while. And so once you take that away, and once he can't score at will against Rudy one-on-one when he needs to, they just could not generate enough offense. And, Murray just, really made everything worse, because usually he's the other escape valve, and he couldn't do it. Of course, they miss Aaron Gordon because he attracts a lot of defensive attention too, and helps create some space. He's a good three-point shooter as well. But Denver, it's unbelievable. They had the number one offense during this like pace and space offensive obsessed era during the regular season. If you watch that series, you would have thought they were 25th in offense, right? I mean, they just couldn't do almost anything. Yes, Joker compiled some numbers, but, I don't want to call them empty stats, but it wasn't the typical impact that he usually has. And that's why, again, there's something deeply wrong here. And this is not a matter of, just run it back next year, the vibes will be better. That's going to be a huge mistake if you try to do that.
It will be a huge mistake, and it won't work, because what they lacked. I'll start it. I'm going to two technical things. Number one, that pass of Gobert to the corner, the first pass to his left. I believe it was Jones was helping out in the middle. What in the world? You're at that level that you're not prepared for the fact that Rudy Gobert cannot dribble more than once without hurting himself. And he's now dribbling downhill towards the basket and you're leaving a guy wide open in the corner to help out on Rudy Gobert, that's bad preparation or the player just not reacting in the moment. But there, throughout, to McDaniel's comments, there is a technical problem, not just an ability problem, in the way that the Nuggets guarded. They did not have the energy, effort, commitment, or technical sets that they executed. Maybe they were just rattled, and they were, but they just didn't do it. They did not do basic fundamental things on defense that you have to do. Number two,
Aaron Gordon cleans up a lot. Aaron Gordon cleans up a lot. And it's like, just like when you take a best scorer off of a team, it's really easy to watch the offense fall apart. It's not always talked about as much. You take the best defensive player off a team, especially if he's not a center, right? But you just take the glue guy, defensive guy out, who's covering up for all these other mistakes. All of a sudden, the whole thing falls to pieces.
Well, and to your point, though, Ben, on the Minnesota side, it was the effort of all five players virtually on almost all possessions that I could see that they were putting in that Denver wasn't. And that's where you can lose your best defensive player, but you can still fundamentally be a decent defensive team if you execute your strategy with effort, commitment, and intensity. And I did not see that in the Nuggets. That's number one. Number two, on Joker's three-point shot, I hope he spends the offseason with a good shooting coach, because there's a difference between his three-point shot now and three-point when he was killing the Lakers. He's loosened his sling up. He goes back further on his release, and he doesn't follow through. You can really see, I'm hoping this goes in his shot, as opposed to
Let's do a PSA to Joker. Joker, I know who your shooting coach should be. It's the guy who's diagnosing it right now. He's got a good track record. I heard his son made a few three-pointers in college and could probably pass some wisdom on. Maybe we need just to get the Sir family reunion with Joker to put it all together and make it happen. What do you think?
I think it wouldn't hurt. That much I would say. And my son works with a lot of Serbian players. So anyway.
See? There you go.
But I think, Ben, it really comes down to little things. And I agree with you. Denver has to make some hard choices. And for me, Adelman's never been the guy. I think it was a bizarre firing when Adelman got the job. And I think, he kind of had some success last year and people thought, this might be the guy, let's keep the continuity. But Denver's got real issues now that go beyond that put them in a position to be a true title contender. And I would hope that would be around Jokic, because I hate to see teams get blown up or start to crumble and fall apart, which is very typical. Whether you look at Golden State, you look at Milwaukee, it's very typical. But you're very right. They're going to have to make some choices. Let's talk about the Wolves, though. The revelations of Dosunmu. I mean, we said that was a great trade. Well, hell yes, that's a great trade. I guess that's an understatement. But, they're going into a completely different world now with a team that really defends, the opposite of what McDaniel said. So now the Wolves, they're not going to be able to attack, chuck and chase, attack the way they did against a very, very different, physically very, very different team, especially with Wemby healthy. Certainly San Antonio's favored. Can the Wolves, with their physical style of play, have some success against the Spurs, in your opinion?
I think it's possible. They really need Edwards back, though. They need the scoring pop. And so if it's one of those things where he's not back until game 5, it's probably going to be too late. It's going to be an ugly, grinding series, I think. San Antonio had some real great moments of flash offensively against Portland. It's going to be harder for them, too. I think this is going to be, for the old school guys like us who like a little bit of a two-way pushback between offense and defense. I think we're going to get some of that. I love that it's Rudy versus Wemby. When Wemby came over, when he was still a player in France, a French player in the professional leagues, he came and did that showcase in the United States to kind of get everybody excited before the draft. And Rudy Gobert showed up, and he was like walking around like he was Wemby's older brother. And he was like asking Wemby to take pictures with him. And, Wemby's just kind of like, sure, man, I'll do it. I guess it just Gobert seemed more excited to be in Wemby's presence than vice versa, which was funny because Gobert was already the established NBA player and Wemby was just this up and coming prospect. And so you get these kinds of moments. We expected it was going to be Joker versus Wemby, master versus apprentice. This is, a master versus apprentice thing, too. And they were teammates for the French team. Wemby wound up kind of taking Gobert's spot during the Olympics, and it worked out pretty well for France. And I know Gobert was not happy about that. I remember he was saying maybe he had to get surgery on an injury or something like that during the Olympics. Everyone was like, what are you talking about? His coach said it never happened. I mean, you could tell he was in his feelings about the fact that he got benched. And so I think he's got a good relationship with Wemby, but this is going to be a healthy competition between those two. And I think they're the central characters in this particular matchup with Ant Edwards out. And so that's why it's going to be a defensive series, just two phenomenal defensive centers. And the question is, who's going to be able to score, with San Antonio's guards, so they can beat you from a lot of different spots, right? And but those guys are also inexperienced too. Now, there was a little bit hit or miss. I mean, Dylan Harper had like one great game against Portland, some other ones not so great.
Exactly.
So they're going to need steady scoring from those guys because I don't think this is going to be a case where Wemby just overwhelms and, he's averaging 40 and, it's going so perfectly. I think the guards, who are relatively small compared to some of Minnesota's pieces on the perimeter are going to have to play bigger than they are. During the regular season, these teams played very close, very competitive games. So I think it could be a great series, but I'm going to take I'm going to take San Antonio.
I'm going to take San Antonio as well. And the asterisk is when will Ant come back and how will Ant be able to effectively play when he does come back? But it certainly was compelling, and it opens up a lot of unexpected conversation like the one you and I just had about the fate of Denver as a franchise and what they do moving forward, and starting to question, is this that kind of tipping point in a player's career where they reach their peak and then they start going down on the sideline? I really will, I wasn't joking about Jokic needing to get with a good shooting coach because I think that will help him a lot, regain his confidence. But also I'm curious as to what he's going to do physically because at this stage of his career, this is a time when, with his body type in particular, he's going to have to not just let Father Time run its natural course. He's going to have to fight back a lot harder than LeBron has fought back with his body. But LeBron's fought back hard his whole time and has been able to maintain unbelievable physical capacity.
I think he looked a little heavy and slow this year compared to like the championship year. I don't know if it's markedly different, I don't know if people like body watch him as closely as they do somebody like Luka, where it feels like Luka goes up 5 or 10 pounds and it's a headline every single time. But I think he could be in better shape. And I also think it's not just about him. Denver needs to construct a scenario where they don't have to lean so heavily on him. This guy logs so many freaking minutes for Denver. And in the playoffs, they don't ever want to take him off the court. So, yeah, he's going to get tired. He's going to look slow. There's going to be some defensive letdowns. Like, he has the biggest burden of every star out there. And so if I was Joker, I would go to the front office and say, hey, guys, I'm going to come back in shape. And I'm going to be an MVP candidate again next year. Don't worry about it. Get me some freaking help. Figure out how to do it. I don't know if you have to trade draft picks in 2045, whenever it might be. Give me some guys who can actually play around me. Otherwise, you're going to run me into the ground again.
Absolutely. He needs more talent with him. He needs more versatility. Now, if they had Peyton Watson, if they had Aaron Gordon, yes, we know that would have made a big difference. But same with Minnesota. That's where this doesn't hold water. Is when you lose 4 players of that caliber for Game 6, but you lose DiVincenzo, you lose your starting backcourt in the same quarter in Game 4, was it? There's no excuses for Denver. In other words, you're absolutely right. Well, Ben, thank you very much for this time. It's been great to talk with you and to go over this. I can't wait till we have a chance to chat again because we got some compelling ending to round 1, and then of course the exciting series that are going to be coming up in round 2.
I'm right there with you. Can't wait. And you said you were serious. He needs a shooting coach. I was serious that it should be you and your son. So let's get it. Let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen.
It all can come together.
Absolutely. Ben Golliver, thanks so much for joining me today on Hoop City with Paul Sir and the Deep Dive.